let's talk about digestive function. So if you have reflux, heartburn, indigestion, gas, bloating, all of these symptoms, and dismiss them as normal because they're so incredibly common in our culture, I'm going to recommend that you don't dismiss them, that you take them to heart. So I was just having a text conversation last week, maybe the week before, times bizarre in the times of COVID, and this conversation was not meant to be via text, and so I decided to make this video and share it with y'all as well as on YouTube to really address this in the way that it deserves to be addressed. So let's talk about digestion, and really the context of this text exchange was that all this irritation in the digestive tract can lead to malnourishment of the whole being and metabolism dysregulation and blood sugar dysregulation and really more severe consequences than someone would think of gas and bloating having. So let's first talk about what normal looks like, and like in an ideal world, which of course we don't live, we are human. We are perfectly imperfect, and we live in this crazy world. And so let's talk about the ideal first. Then let's talk about ways that it can vary. And then we'll talk a little bit about things that I tend to recommend to many of my patients and what they're for. So first, let's talk about digestion, absorption, detoxification, and elimination. And those are the 4 topics that I tend to talk about with digestion, GI function. So digestion primarily starts in the mouth, happens in the stomach, and think about optimal digestion would be things you take in by mouth get broken down into teeny, teeny, tiny pieces so that when the contents empty from your stomach to your small intestine, those teeny, teeny, tiny pieces are able to get absorbed through the lining of the small intestine, which is folded and has all of these little ups and down valleys and peaks so that it really has lots of surface area for maximum absorption. Most everything gets absorbed in the small and upper large intestine. The only things that are supposed to pass through the small intestine into the large intestine would be like undigestible fibers, which are beneficial because they act like brooms of the system and help sweep debris and keep everything moving and healthy and turned over. And they also feed our good bacteria in our colon. So that is optimal. That is, most things get broken down into teeny tiny pieces, absorbed in the small intestine. The only thing that passes through would be indigestible fibers, things that are supposed to be good for us in our large intestine. So now let's talk about where things can break down. Anytime you eat something that you don't have a great ability to digest, instead of getting broken down into teeny tiny pieces, you have larger pieces. They're still tiny in relatively speaking, but they're not tiny enough once they get to the small intestine to be absorbed into the bloodstream. So when you have pieces that were supposed to be broken down completely entering into the small intestine, they can irritate the small intestine lining. In the optimal digestion, I talked about the fact that the lining had folds and hills and valleys and all sorts of really well-designed structures to maximize absorption. Well, if you have large particles entering from the stomach that were not digested, that should have been, it irritates that tissue. When you irritate that tissue, you can destroy some of that really amazing structure that maximizes absorption. So not only are you irritating the tissue, you're creating a lack of absorption because you're breaking down that really cool structure that's designed for maximized absorption. So anytime you don't totally digest what's in your stomach, you then begin to create irritation and then potential inflammation in your small and large intestine because you have larger particles that are getting down there that are then irritating and are getting in the way. How we link this to malnourishment or malnutrition or nutrient deficiency is that when you damage those structures that are made for maximal absorption in the small intestine, you therefore are not absorbing everything that you're taking in by mouth. So what do we do about this? Now, this is where, as a naturopathic doctor, I differ incredibly from mainstream. Mainstream might put you on a PPI, which is a proton pump inhibitor, or an antacid, acid reflux reducer, whatever you want to call it, to block acid to minimize an upper GI irritation. Now, what is that doing? That is suppressing your stomach acid so that your upper GI tissue is not being bombarded by acid, but what is it also doing? It's blocking your digestion. And when you block digestion, you end up with larger particles going from the stomach to the small intestine, creating irritation, damaging those really cool structures in the small intestine that are made for maximized absorption, and you're decreasing your nutrient absorption with those acid blockers. How many of you have been treated by a gastroenterologist or your primary care physician who happens to be an MD and not had any discussion about healing the tissue, soothing the tissue? You may have visited a nutritionist or even a naturopathic doctor who just said, well, don't eat these foods, and kind of cut a lot of foods out of your diet. Again, if there's no discussion about optimizing your digestion in your stomach and healing the tissue in your small intestine, then you're only getting an incomplete treatment. So, what do I do to address these issues? First, let's talk about the digestion of the stomach. If we sit down and take 3 to 5 nice deep breaths before we eat anything, we're encouraging our body to be open and receptive to healing. So, how we eat is just as important as what we eat. So when we not multitask, not eat on the run, but sit down, take a few deep breaths, really get ourselves present, that's going to increase the likelihood that we're actually going to make stomach acid and digestive enzymes and actually digest our food. So notice this is a lifestyle choice. This is something that every single one of you can do. It's free. You just have to get in the habit of taking 3 to 5 deep breaths before you sit down, as you sit down to eat, before you start eating, to help your body be ready to make stomach acid and digestive enzymes to fully digest what you're about to take in. Free, easy, you just have to remember to do it. I recommend putting Post-it notes around places you tend to eat that just say breathe. And that will help remind you, oh yeah, I'm going to take 3 to 5 deep belly breaths before I take my first bite. So that helping your body be ready is number 1. 2 is more global, of just stress relief in general. We all can practice managing our stress, both in minimizing things that stress us and helping to integrate, release things that we can't control. 2 very important things that when we lower our stress response, we're increasing our digestive function. Think about it. If there's a lion about to eat you, you don't need to digest lunch. You need to power your muscles and your brain so you can fight or run or scheme. So our digestion gets really powered down when we're stressed out. So we can work on belly breaths before eating. We can work on our overall nervous system state. The secondary things that are options would be a digestive enzyme supplement or a hydrochloric acid, stomach acid supplement. Now, I don't go to supplements right away because there are things in life we can do. I don't want to be popping dozens of pills a day to try to offset things that we can just make choices in life just to accomplish. But sometimes through chronic stress or chronic dysfunction, we really do need some digestive enzymes or some stomach acid support. And that's really why people work with me, because I want to individualize it for you. I don't want any of you to run out and buy digestive enzymes without first exploring what's going on for you. So that kind of talks about the indigestion from the stomach perspective. If you're not digesting your food, you don't feel great. That indigestion, that bloating, the gas comes from bad bacteria in the small and large intestine who are feeding off of those particles that should have been digested and absorbed but didn't get digested and absorbed. Therefore, they're feeding the bad guys. Another thing that I tend to use to help someone when they're feeling all of this yuck in their core is something called Demulcent Herbs. And Demulcent is just a fancy word for describing that an herb makes a slime layer that coats the inside of your digestive tract. Think of it, if you have a cut on your hand and you apply salve to kind of help it heal, whether it's beeswax, calendula, vitamin A and D, any of that, coconut oil. If you apply a salve to soothe it, that's what Demulcent Herbs do in your digestive tract. So again, if someone has a lot of this discomfort, I don't want to just give them an antibiotic to kill the bacteria that's in there taking over. I want to really encourage them to be soothed so that their body can heal. So that's where the Demulcent Herbs come in. Things, if you've ever made a ground flaxseed egg replacement, and it's like that egg whitey, slimy-ish, mucusy stuff, that is what I'm referring to, that coating and soothing mechanism of the polysaccharide slime layer. So that's demulcents. Marshmallow root is often used in this way. Oat is often used in this way. When you make a lot of water with a little of oats, the water gets a little slippery. That's a demulcent. So things of that nature help to soothe. Another thing that helps the tissues to actually heal more quickly. Now I want to be careful how I emphasize this. Tissues heal more quickly. That doesn't mean that because of what you take, your tissues heal. Your tissues are going to heal all on their own because you are an amazing being. Your tissues heal, but let's give your cells their favorite food so that they heal as fast as possible. That's where something called glutamine comes in. Glutamine can be found in cabbage as a food source. So nourishingmeals.com is one of the places I send patients and I go to myself for recipes. They have a great healing quinoa cabbage soup recipe that I often recommend for my patients who are trying to have digestive function regained. So cabbage is high in glutamine, it's an amino acid, and it helps to give the cells of your digestive tract their favorite food so they turn over as quickly as possible. That's part of the healing support. And the last piece of this process is to supplement with probiotics. Probiotics are the good bacteria that your body likes to have in it. We feed it by eating the right types of fibers. They give us vitamin K, they give us immune support, and so it benefits us for having the good bacteria in us. Now there's a wide variety of bacteria on the market. Again, that's why you see me, so I can individualize your care as opposed to having you go out somewhere and get something that you think may or may not work. You trust my 12 years of experience, my education, and other patients' experience that I can draw from. So that, in a very longer than intended video, is really the upshot of digestive dysfunction and why it can affect your nutrient status, your metabolism, your dysregulation of your blood sugar, your bad bacteria, and your immune system. So we really want to make sure that this foundational structure of your digestive tract is working optimally. So you are digesting, absorbing, detoxifying, and eliminating with ease so that you minimize your inflammation, you maximize your nourishment, and you're less symptomatic. Who wants to be looking for a bathroom everywhere you go? One last thought around that. It's interesting. For those of us, some of us, when we get inflamed and irritated and our digestive tract isn't functioning, we get diarrhea. For others, we get constipated. So either of those ends of the elimination spectrum can be found with any of these GI dysfunctions. We all just have different patterns of showing how we're out of balance. But it doesn't mean that the process of supporting the system would look any different. Thanks for listening. Post questions where you have them, and let me know what you'd like to hear about next. Take care.